Shalom Israel, this is Dominic. How are you guys doing? Today we're going to do a reading on the book of Revelation. We're going to read chapter 17 together. Why? Because it's very important that we understand prophecy so that we can prepare ourselves to enter into Zion. Let's begin. Revelation chapter 17, verse 1. And there came one of the seven angels which had the seven vials, and talked with me, saying unto me, Come hither, I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore that sitteth upon many waters, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication, and the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. I will show unto thee the judgment of the great whore. Many people have been taught that the great whore is the Vatican, and that the nation, or that the nation that they are talking about, the great whore, is Russia, or it is Iran. But no, the great whore is in fact the United States of America. In verse 2 we read, with whom the kings of the earth have committed fornication. Well, the nations of the world are in bed with the United States. One of the instruments that she used to get her will through the other nations is the United Nations, an assembly of nations over which the United States sit. Well, these nations have a tendency to follow the U.S.'s lead. These nations have a tendency to accept whatever the United States tells them to do. They have a tendency to want to be like the United States. And so they are in bed with her economically, culturally, spiritually, and any other way that you can imagine. Well, let's continue. We read that the inhabitants of the earth have been made drunk with the wine of her fornication. The United States is a country that lives very lavishly. In doing so, they put aside the laws and the commandments, and they teach people to do the same thing. But these inhabitants, these people, these inhabitants of the earth, they don't mind, because everybody wants to be like the United States. Everybody wants to live like the Americans. And so as she continues to trespass the law, to transgress the law, the people of the world see no problem with doing it the same way. Verse 3, so he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a colored beast full of the names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. So the woman, the United States, sits on top of a beast, a scarlet-colored beast, a red beast. What is that beast? That beast is Europe. Why is Europe called a beast? Because the same way a beast goes out and devours, that's exactly what the European nations have done over the past 500 years. They have gone out, they have left Europe and pushed into Africa, pushed into the Americas, pushed into Asia, devouring all of the countries in their path, killing, building cities upon blood, destroying entire nations, and putting whoever remains into slavery or into servitude. They have behaved as a beast that has gone out to conquer and devour the world. But we read that the beast is scarlet colored. That's a hint. And for that hint, let's go to Genesis 25. We read about a nation that is scarlet colored. We read about a red nation. In Genesis 25, let's pick it up at verse 21. And Isaac entreated the father for his wife because she was barren, and the father was entreated of him. Rebekah his wife conceived, and the children struggled together within her. And she said, if it be so, why am I thus? And she went to inquire of the father. She was having a troubled pregnancy. She was in pain all the time. Verse 23, and the father said unto her, 2 nations are in thy womb, 2 manner of people shall be separated from thy bowels, and the one people shall be stronger than the other, and the elder shall serve the younger. So 2 nations are in Rebekah's womb. That means that it's 2, we read, 2 manner of people, meaning that 2 very different nations. If one nation is belligerent, the other nation loves peace. If one nation wants to live under the laws and the commandments of the Father, the other nation has no respect, no regard for the Most High at all. We read that the elder shall serve the younger. Well, let's see who the elder is. Let's see who the younger is. Verse 24, and when her days to be delivered were fulfilled, behold, there were twins in her womb, and the first came out red, the first came out scarlet colored. That is Esau. His brother, all over, and the first came out red all over like a hairy garment, and they called his name Esau. The first one came out red. Esau was called Edom. Edom means red. Esau is called red. And so all of the nations that came out of Esau are called Edomites. They are called red. Or in Revelation chapter 17, scarlet colored. Verse 26, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel, and his name was called Jacob. And Isaac was 80 years old when she bare them. Again, and after that came his brother out, and his hand took hold on Esau's heel. So that means that as Esau was exiting the womb, Jacob was entering the world himself. As Esau made his exit, Jacob made his entrance. Esdras helps us to understand what that means very clearly. Let's go there to Esdras chapter 6. Let's pick it up at verse 7. Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? Now remember, the book of Revelation is talking about the end of the world, the end of this present world, as it ushers in a new world. So the book of Revelation covers what will happen at the end of the world, and it covers who will rule the world to come. Esdras saw it. We read again, verse 7, to Esdras chapter 6, verse 7. Then I answered and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? Or when shall the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? When shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? The parting asunder of times. When will this world end and the new world begin? Verse 8, and he said unto me, from Abraham unto Isaac, When Jacob and Esau were born of him, Jacob's hand held first the heel of Esau. Esdras is about to explain Genesis 25, the birth of Jacob and Esau to us. Verse 9, for Esau is the end of the world, and Jacob is the beginning of it that followeth. As soon as Esau's world ends, Jacob's world begins. It's only fitting that the book of Revelation, in telling us about the beast, is describing the nations of Esau. It is describing the nations of Europe, most of the citizens of which are the children of Esau. Now, let's go back to Revelation chapter 17. Let's read verse 4. Let's go to verse 3 again. So he carried me away in the spirit into the wilderness, and I saw a woman sit upon a scarlet-colored beast, full of names of blasphemy, having 7 heads and 10 horns. Why does the beast have 7 heads and 10 horns? Let's explain it from now. The 7 heads represents the 7 nations that sat on top of the beast during the beast's current state of existence. Europe came into her own in the late 1400s. At that time, it was Portugal that had the reserve currency. It was Portugal that was the economic power of Europe. Portugal sat on top of the beast. Well, Portugal was the first of the 7 heads. The second one was Spain. When Spain went into the island of Haiti and stole all that gold from the local inhabitants, she propelled herself at the top. She propelled herself over Portugal and then occupied that seat on top of the beast, on top of Europe. So Spain is the second head. The third head was the Netherlands. The fourth head was France. The fifth head was England. So all of these nations at some point held the reserve currency. That means that they were the most powerful economy in Europe, and at various points, the most powerful economy in the entire world. So it went from Portugal to Spain, the Netherlands, then France, then England. The fifth is the United States. She has the reserve currency today. She is the most powerful economy today, but she's about to lose that power. So those are the 7 heads. How about the 10 horns? Well, what do you use a horn for? An animal uses a horn to defend itself or to attack. It is an instrument that is used to thrust and to push through. The 10 horns represent the 10 strongest nations of Europe that use their horn to push into Africa, conquering many nations inside of Africa. They use their horns to conquer the nations of the Americas, and they use their horns to conquer nations in Asia. So this would include Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, France, England, Belgium, Germany, and Russia too. All of these nations conquered using their horns. So they are called the 10 horns. Let's go to verse 4. And the woman was arrayed in purple and scarlet color. Why purple? Because she reigns as king. Why scarlet color? Not only is red the color of the nations of Esau, but because her hand is filthy with sin and with blood. Again, she built her empire and her cities that filled the earth on blood. And we read that she is decked with gold and precious stones and pearls, having a golden cup in her hand full of abominations and filthiness of her fornication. Where did she get the gold and the precious stones? She stole them. There is no commandment that she will not break in order to acquire wealth. She lives for gold. Gold is her God. Verse 5, and upon her forehead was a name written, Mystery, Babylon the Great. We read mystery, comma. Why is she a mystery? Because most of the people of the earth believe that Babylon is either a nation that existed before, and this is not talking about the end of times, or that Babylon simply represents the Vatican. No, the Christian religion is part of the Babylonian Empire, but you can't look at the whore or the beast and simply say it is Vatican. No. The whore is a country. The beast is a group of countries. Mystery, Babylon the Great, the mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Right now, the U.S. has the crown. It is not on top of France's head. It is not on top of Portugal's head anymore. The U.S. bears the crown. She is the current mother of harlots and abominations of the earth. Verse 6, and I saw the woman drunken with the blood of the saints and with the blood of the martyrs of Emmanuel. And when I saw her, I wondered with great admiration. The woman was drunken with the blood of the saints. Why? Because remember, Esau was fighting Jacob from inside the womb. There is a verse in the Bible that says that the father will war with Amalek throughout the generations. Amalek is a son of Esau through his firstborn son Eliphaz. Well, the Edomites, the children, the nations of Esau have been battling against the children of Israel for generations and generations, for well over 2,000 years. Well then, Esau is full of the blood of the saints, full of the blood of the children of Israel. And the U.S. now bears the sin of all the nations that came before her, that destroyed Israel. Let's go to verse 7. And the angel said unto me, Wherefore didst thou marvel? I will tell thee the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carrieth her, which hath the 7 heads and 10 horns. Why does the beast carry the woman? Well, after World War II, all of the nations of Europe got together. They took counsel among each other, and they decided to put the crown on the head of the United States and say, you bear rule over us. You lead us. Again, through you, we can dominate the entire world. So the beast, the nations of Europe, set up the United States to be where she is today. Why? Because the United States is Europe's firstborn son. And wears the crown. Let's go to verse 8. The beast that thou sawest, that was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder. Let's read it again. Verse 8. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. The beast that thou sawest was and is not. This is talking about Europe. How? Remember when you was in school and they taught you that their civilization began with the Greco-Roman Empire. Well, the nations of Europe came out of the Greco-Roman Empire. What does that mean? The Greco-Roman Empire was a very powerful empire that bared rule over the earth beginning roughly 2,300 years ago. Eventually, the Greco-Roman Empire fell. That empire died. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, because that nation died. When you read in your history books, you came across an age called the Dark Ages. That's because the European nations were in the bottomless pit. They descended into hell. They died. The Greco-Roman Empire, Esau died. And if you read the book of Joshua, chapter 90, verses 30 and 31 tells you very clearly that the children of Esau became one with the children of Rome. Most of the European nations came directly out of Esau. We read, the beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit. So the Greco-Roman Empire died. Europe was in the Dark Ages. She was in the bottomless pit. So she shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. When did she ascend out of the bottomless pit? Well, you read about the Renaissance. A Renaissance means roughly a rebirth, a type of a regeneration. So Europe was reborn. She came out of the bottomless pit. She came out of hell. And she had life again. And within a couple of 100 years, she set her sights on conquering the entire world. We read, she shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition, but her end shall be that she shall go into perdition. That this beast, the European nations, shall fall and shall rise no more. They will go back into the bottomless pit, this time never to rise again. We read, and they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world. Why will they wonder? Because most people living in the world today cannot fathom, cannot imagine that the United States or Europe will ever fall from power. They imagine that they will rule at least for another 1,000 years and most likely forever. But that will not be the case. And they will wonder when they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. Verse 9, and here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. We spoke about the mountains before. Those nations that had the reserve currency, those nations which represented Europe's economic might. Portugal, Spain, the Netherlands, France, England, and currently the United States. Verse 10, and there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen. So the first 5 fell. The 6th one is the United States, and one is, and the other is not yet come. The one that is to come is most likely Russia. And there are 7 kings, 5 are fallen, and one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. We know that Babylon will fall. And we've read that a country will come from the north to destroy Babylon. Well, leading that charge of nations, that country from the north, is none other than Russia itself. So when the U.S. falls at the hands of Russia, Russia will now be the most powerful nation in Europe. But there is a plan, a conspiracy. All of this is by design. We will continue reading. We read that he must continue a short space. Russia's leadership, Russia sitting on top of the beast, will not last long. Verse 11, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth. So the beast itself will represent the eighth king. Remember, we read about 7. The beast itself is the eighth and is of the 7. What does that mean? That means that when Russia sits on top of the beast, the other nations of Europe will now fight against Russia, so that Europe will become one beast, where there will be one voice, one king that shall reign over all the nations. So we read, and the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth and is of the 7, and goeth into perdition. So after Europe as a whole wrestles control of the beast, of the European nations from Russia, she will imagine that she has succeeded, that she will now rule the entire world. But the Father shall use Israel as his arm. He shall use Israel as his hammer to destroy Esau, to destroy the beast. The beast shall go into perdition. Verse 12, and the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which have received no kingdom as yet, but receive power as kings 1 hour with the beast. Again, the 10 horns represents those nations that use their horn to push into Asia, Europe, and the Americas in order to conquer the world. Well, in doing so, they ruled with the beast 1 hour at a time. Verse 13, these shall have one mind, and shall give their power and strength unto the beast. So these European nations have one mind. They got together and say, you know what, we can fight among each other, but whenever another nation confronts us, we will always join forces in order to defeat that nation. Well, they have one mind, and they gave their power and strength to the beast. What does that mean? Well, who sits on top of the beast? The United States. After World War II, they gave their power and their strength to the United States that rules the beast. Verse 14, these shall make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb shall overcome them. For he is the King of kings, the Lord of lords, and they that are with him are called, chosen, and faithful. Esau has been making war against the children of Jacob from the very beginning. Europe, the beast, the children, the nations that came out of Esau, the Edomites, continue to make war against the children of Israel to this very day. Verse 15, and he saith unto me, the waters which thou sawest, where the horse sitteth, are peoples and multitudes and nations and tongues. Very often in the Bible, water represents people. Well, the United States dominates not only the beast, but they dominate in South America. They dominate in North America. They dominate in Africa and in Asia. Well, they dominate many, many people. nations and many tongues. Verse 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore. So the nations of Europe hate the United States. Remember, it is called the Anglo-American Empire. Even now, we already see the Anglo-American Empire separating itself from Europe. The first phase of it is called Brexit, where the Anglos, the Brits, have separated themselves from Europe. And now through Donald Trump, the United States is being separated from Europe as well. They hate the U.S. Why? Because right now the United States is saying that she alone should be great. It's not let's make the beast great. It's not let's make Europe great. It's let's make America great. She is giving the other nations of Europe reason to hate her. And that is part of Donald Trump's job. Why? It's all part of the plan. Reread in verse 16 again. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. So even as we speak, Europe is already conspiring to destroy America, to destroy the United States. Why? So that she may reign. There is an example of that. These Canaanite nations, these heathen nations, these nations that came out of Moab and Ammon and came out of all the abominable nations that the Father hated because of their hatred for him. They used to sacrifice their firstborn son. Let's go to 2 Kings chapter 3, where we will find an example of this. If we go to 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 26, we read, And when the king of Moab saw that the battle was too sore for him, he took with him 700 men that drew the swords to break through even unto the king of Edom. But they could not. Then he took his eldest son that should have reigned in his stead, and offered him for a burnt offering upon the wall. Because the king of Moab wanted to succeed, he sacrificed his firstborn son, hoping that that will allow him to prevail. Well, after he did that, we read, And there was great indignation against Israel, and they departed from him and returned to their own land. So even though Israel won the battle, they did not push the fight. When he sacrificed his firstborn son, Israel retreated. Well, the Moabite king sacrificed his first son to Moloch. That is something that they do when they want to succeed, when they want to gain power, when they want to become successful economically. They have a tendency of sacrificing their firstborn son. Well, that's exactly what we are reading in Revelation chapter 17, verse 16. The United States is Europe's firstborn son, the heir to the throne, the crown prince. Well, Europe is about to smash the United States' head against the wall, the same way that the Moabite king did to his crown prince. Why? In order to succeed with their plans to reign upon the earth forever. They are looking to start a world war that will end with one government, one military, one religion, one education, one language, and one religion for the entire world. That is their goal. And to achieve this, they calculated that the best thing to do is to burn America, is to sacrifice America to Moloch so that they may reign. We read, "These shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. For the mighty one hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will." So this is the Father's doing. To burn America. This is the Father's doing. To destroy Europe, to destroy the beast, and to destroy every other single nation that comes up against him. For the mighty one hath put in their hearts to fulfill his will, and to agree, and give their kingdom unto the beast, until the words of the mighty one shall be fulfilled. And the woman which thou sawest is that great city. It is a city. It is not a system. It is not the Vatican. It is a city, and that city represents the government. The same way when you say Paris, you automatically say France. When you say Washington, you automatically say the United States. When you say New York, you automatically say the United States. The woman which thou sawest is that great city, is the United States, which reigneth over the kings of the earth. Well, the United States is about to fall. Are you going to stay there, or are you going to have an exit plan? Are you going to prepare to leave? Are you going to begin to look for Zion? What you're seeing happening to the United States is all part of the Father's plan. He put it in the minds of the Europeans. He has beguiled them. He has allowed them to foolishly believe that their plan of world conquest and domination will succeed. He has allowed them to believe that they will put in place a government that will reign forever. But no, it is the government of the nation of Israel, the true Israelites, that will reign forever. You who are in the United States, who lives inside the great whore, you have to heed the words of the Most High. Apocalypse or Revelation chapter 18 verse 4. Come out of her, my people, that you do not participate in her sins, and so that you do not be destroyed when she is destroyed, and her destruction is at hand. With that, we say shalom.